All right, Alexander, let's do a follow-up to what's going on in Afghanistan, the situation in Afghanistan. And in the video, I kind of questioned the fact that maybe is the U.S. really going to leave Afghanistan? And now it looks like they are. There are a lot of people. Actually, Pat Buchanan wrote an article the other day, and he compared it to the U.S. withdrawing from Vietnam in Saigon. That's what he actually compared it to, what's happened in Afghanistan. He also said 20 years, and I'm paraphrasing what Pat Buchanan said. He said 20 years and we got nothing. I mean, there's no real benefit for the United States, of course. I'm not talking the contractors, the military industrial complex, all stuff. Okay, we talked about that in our video. But as the United States, geopolitically, foreign policy-wise, the country, there was no benefit to the 21 years in Afghanistan. Am I changing my tune? It does seem like the U.S. is really retreating. Is that true?
I think it is, but can I just say I don't think you should take back what you said, because I don't think that was the original plan. I think the original plan was very much exactly as you said, that the United States would withdraw most of its visible troops from Afghanistan, but CIA contractors would remain there, mercenaries would remain there. The United States would continue to bomb the country. They were trying to get the Pakistan to agree that the United States re-establish bases for drones in Pakistan. They were hoping to do all of that. What I think has overtaken all those plans and has made everything chaos now is that the Afghan government, which I think that they had expected would survive, at least for a few months, the US pullout, so that it could provide, if you like, a cover for this covert reintroduction of US forces. What they've discovered is that instead of that happening, the Afghan government is disintegrating. Its military across the country is disintegrating. And this is happening at such speed that it's thrown US plans into complete chaos. So they can't keep 600 troops in Kabul to defend the embassy and the airport, because they would become a target of 90,000 Taliban troops, and perhaps even more than that. They can't do all of these various things that they were doing, keeping British SAS troops there, organising militias in the north of the country, anti-Taliban militias in the north of the country, keeping the drugs thing operating in whatever way you think about. It can't happen because of the speed of the collapse, which has taken them completely by surprise. And I suspect the thing that's astonished them most is that the fact that the Taliban is advancing rapidly in the north of Afghanistan, in areas that are not Pashto, that are Tajik, a completely different ethnicity, one which historically was hostile to the Taliban, but which now the people there, the militias there, the local chiefs, the local councils, they seem to be going over to the Taliban en masse. And that is depriving the US of any section of the country where they look like they can establish bases. So I think that's what's happened. I think that the original plan was the one you said, but it's been overtaken by events because they completely misjudged the weakness of the Afghan government and of the Afghan structure. By the way, can I say something? I mean, I don't always like doing this, but I mean, if we don't blow our own trumpet, no one will do it for us. We predicted, if we go back in time to our earlier videos, we predicted that without US support, the Afghan government in Kabul would not be able to survive. And it's turned out exactly as we said. Pat Buchanan is absolutely right. All the US has achieved in Afghanistan, apart from destroying Afghanistan, is its own humiliation, because this will be a major debacle when it plays out as it has. But once again, the US has completely misjudged the situation in a country. Things which were obvious to outsiders, even, to the two of us. The US, with all its vast intelligence apparatus, the CIA, the NSA, its satellites, its spies, its informers, it's all of that. They just didn't see it. They didn't get it. They didn't realize how fragile the structure they spent all those trillions of dollars creating, how fragile it really was.
Yeah, the Taliban is advancing at incredible speeds. It's really stunning to watch, Alexander. I mean, I don't think the government's going to last much longer. We have the images from the Bagram air base, and not even the mainstream media could suppress these images. The U.S. appears to have left in the middle of the night, like just bolted. They didn't tell anybody. There was no warning to the government. There was nothing. It just took its stuff and that's it, just disappeared.
Absolutely.
And now you have videos of the Taliban not only going into the airbase, Alexander, but now they've got all the weapons from the airbase as well. It's almost like this is deliberate now at this point in time. Like, you know, the U.S. is saying, Taliban, here you go. Let's make your takeover of the country easier. I don't know what to make of it. Very bizarre.
I entirely agree. I mean, it's like they're leaving like a thief in the night. It's quite astonishing to see, actually. It's terrible. And, you know, I'm old enough to remember in 1989 when the Red Army left Afghanistan, and there were ceremonies and there were parades in Kabul and there were speeches by leaders from both the Soviet Union, as it then was, and Afghanistan. I mean, it happened in public. It didn't happen like this. And the Soviets did leave a functioning government and army behind them, which did survive for 3 years until the Soviet Union itself fell. So, you know, there is a contrast there. The way the US is doing it, it shows how badly planned this was, how ill thought out this was, and how badly the neocons in Afghanistan have failed. And, you know, I'm starting to develop a theory that the neocons never wanted a strong Afghan army and never wanted a strong Afghan government in Afghanistan, because had there been a strong army in Afghanistan and a strong government, the pressure would always have been, there would have been much pressure much earlier for the US troops to withdraw. They never wanted the troops to withdraw. They always wanted the US troops to stay in Afghanistan forever. And that meant that they had to keep the army and the government as weak as possible. But the result is that when the political pressure became too strong and the US had to leave, the structure that was created has collapsed like a house of cards. The only thing that held it together was American money, trillions of dollars of it, and American troops. Without it, it just goes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what happens next, Alexander? The Taliban is going to take over the country. People forget in all the ISIS stuff that we've had to talk about over the past couple of years, people forget about the Taliban when they ruled Afghanistan. I remember them blowing apart the Buddha statues.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I imagine they're not going to take kindly to the people that the United States is leaving behind in Afghanistan. The Afghan people who supported and aided the U.S. presence in Afghanistan. I mean, there's going to be a lot of normal civilians who had, you know, day-to-day jobs with the U.S. government, translators, people working in construction, other people that were involved with the government that was being propped up by the U.S. I imagine the Taliban is not going to be kind to them either. I just imagine a lot of bad stuff is going to go down. But how do you see things unfolding?
A lot of very bad things are going to happen. Now, the stories that we're hearing, and this is all rumours at the moment, but the story is that the Taliban at the end of July is going to be at the gates of Kabul. That's only a few weeks away. That they're then going to give an ultimatum and a time for the government essentially to hand over power, and that will leave a couple of weeks, perhaps 2 or 3 weeks, for whoever is compromised in Kabul and in other places, presumably to leave. So just as we saw with the fall of Saigon, so possibly with Afghanistan, we could see an air evacuation of lots of people from Kabul as the United States rushes to to the extent that it can, its people out. And then the Taliban will move in and they will re-establish their emirate. And they made all kinds of promises about how much more moderate they are. I don't think anybody takes this especially seriously. They will impose again their theocratic rule over the country. The only thing I'm going to say about the Taliban is that I think that they are a bit more familiar with the outside world and how it works than they were back in the 90s. So, though I don't think they will be at all compromising in the way that they govern Afghanistan itself, I suspect we're going to see a very, very tough and, if you like, dark time for the Afghan people. I think that they will nonetheless try, the Taliban will try and keep stable relations with the powers around. So they've already apparently, and I only learnt this morning, by the way, but they've apparently already given assurances to the Russians, for example, that they will not tolerate the presence of ISIS in Afghanistan and that they will not allow jihadi fighters to cross the border from Afghanistan into Central Asia. So they've already been trying to patch up things with the Russians. They're apparently trying to talk with the Chinese, even the Iranians to some extent. So I suspect a very tough rule in Afghanistan itself, but they will try to avoid wars with their neighbours, because I think they realise that in their own interests they need a consolidated period of peace in Afghanistan in order to strengthen their regime there. But it's a tragic failure from every respect, a disastrous failure, one which is utterly predictable. And the neocons, again, have taken a country and they've made it worse, which is what they always do. And when I talk about the neocons and making it worse, it's important to stress again that US involvement in Afghanistan didn't begin with 9/11. It goes all the way back to the 1970s when they backed the anti-Soviet, the anti-government fighters that were fighting the Soviet-backed government in the 1970s. And there have been repeated moments up to now, when there was a fork in the road, and the US always and invariably made the wrong decision where Afghanistan is concerned. And, it was all going to be, I remember this so well, that, when they started the war in Afghanistan in the 70s, that this was going to be Russia's Vietnam, the Soviet Union's Vietnam. And of course it was to some extent. But how ironic that is, if we now see an aerial evacuation from Kabul, like the one from Saigon. It'll be America's second Vietnam. And that's what the neocons have achieved for the United States.
Yeah, I'll end it on this note. Where empires go to die. That is Afghanistan. And I look at this evacuation, this retreat from the United States that's taking place. Stunning. It's a stunning retreat. And I think where empires go to die, and then I think about all the internal stuff that's happening in the United States, in North America, in Canada, and how they're trying to tear down all the institutions there and remake the entire hemisphere. And I just think this is just bad times are coming, man. Bad times.
Very bad times. You're absolutely right. Can I just also quickly say a very last word? I know some people are going to be furious with me for what I'm going to say now. Trump would have done it differently. I mean, he did his deal with the Taliban that they would all pull out by May, and He had a deal. He had a deal. Exactly. An orderly retreat. He'd have negotiated toughly with the Taliban, as he always likes to do, and he would have come to a deal with them. He would have done it, and there would have been some kind of power-sharing arrangement. How stable that would have been, I don't know. But we would not have seen these absolutely terrible scenes of collapse and disaster and Bagram being taken over and piles of weapons pouring into the hands of Taliban fighters, which, I mean, could leak out to jihadi terrorists around the Middle East now. I mean, you bear that in mind. I mean, but he would have done it differently. It would have been a different story with him, with the way in which this administration has done it. The United States has visibly failed, and it's appeared weak. It's been defeated in the mountains of the Hindu Kush. The great hyperpower has been shown to be powerless and is being humiliated, as I said, in a debacle. I mean, you have to go back to the Iranian hostage siege back in 79 to see something, 79, 80, to see anything similar. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible affair. And it's happened under this administration. And to be very clear, they own it. I mean, it didn't have to end this way. The neocons authored this disaster, but it was the current administration that brought that brought it to its final stage, and that's not a coincidence. It took Democrats to start it, Carter and Brzezinski being, of course, the father of the neocons, and it's taken Democrats to bring it to its inevitable conclusion.
People are going to be furious with you on that statement, but you know what? We're calling it like we see it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And can I just say, I mean, I'm not acquitting Republicans either. I mean, I mean George W. Bush and Rumsfeld and all that crowd, John Bolton. I mean, they did their absurdities and their horrible things in Afghanistan too. Their idiocies there. So I'm not just saying that it's only the Democrats, but what I'm pointing out is fact. And as I said, Trump would have done it different. I could see that he was. I mean, he didn't have a plan exactly, but he had a feel for these things, which these guys just don't have at all. They thought they could just pull the troops out, something would be left behind, the CIA would go back in and do its work, the SAS and Britain would be there to do its work too, you keep a couple of hundred troops in Kabul, and the country would be left under a kind of American control. And in fact, what's happened instead is the whole place has collapsed like a house of cards.
All right, we'll leave it there, guys. Locals, Super U, ODYSEE, BitChute, Rumble. You'll find all those links down below. You'll find all our videos on those platforms. Definitely check us out on Locals. Definitely check us out on Super U. You'll find those links down below in the Duran shop. Pick up some merch and 10% off when you use the code ROMIES.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right. Take care, everybody.